So Rami, what's one piece of advice you would share to your younger self? Say you could go back 10, 20 years ago and say, hey, Rami, this is an advice for you. What is that advice?
The road in entrepreneurship is quite difficult. It's quite challenging, and you're always going to be under a lot of stress, whether it's financially or the unknowns that you don't know how it's going to play out, and you're always going to be approached with, say, offers or proposals or situations where you need to take quite decision making that can have a big impact on your future and the future of the business, right? And more often than not, you're actually in a desperate situation, right? What I say is you need to have the self awareness to be able to understand that you are desperate. These are the challenges. And because of that desperation, you might be taken advantage of. And you have to have that strong willpower, right? To say no to things, even if it means shutting that business and going back to being an employee, right?
Oh, wow.
And I've had those moments, right? Especially early on in accepting certain funding terms where I said, and I was really desperate.
So you
Runways,
had like
days.
a guy that wanted to fund your company and they were giving you rules that were unacceptable.
Exactly. And it was days, my runway, right? And I said a hard no. And he actually gave money to someone else, which they accepted those terms. And I said a hard no. And I still ended up getting what I wanted, right? Even though it meant that I might stop the business. I need to go back to finding a job and then maybe reattempting entrepreneurship later down the road. And he still accepted what I offered. And I look back at that, it kind of had a massive impact, especially if I'm going through an exit or, or my motivation, let's say, during the running through in the next couple, from those early years to where I am
Right.
today. Right, I could have been very demotivated
By accepting those terms that were not in your favor.
So I had a bit of a foresight, be like, okay, if I accept this, what are the outcomes? What's going to happen? How is this going to impact my financial returns on exit? And I played out my scenarios, low case, base case, and high case. And there were certain times in our venture that we thought that this would end, right? And if I had that term and we were close to ending in the future, I would have been like, this plus this, I'm out.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have that, I managed to pick up myself multiple times up again to get to where we are today.
By making one decision that wasn't
Yeah.
based on someone taking advantage
I
of
couldn't
your...
have I couldn't have given up halfway through the road because that decision would have been a massive demotivating
And what do you
factor
tell
to go
yourself
close.
at that time when you're under pressure and you get a decision that doesn't favor you? What are those words that you could say to yourself, like, to keep you not making that decision? Because it becomes very tempting at some point, right?
It's really self-awareness, just being self-aware of your situation. Understand, yes, you are going through a difficult time. Yes, you are financially squeezed out. Your business might go under in a couple. You just need to be aware of it, and you need to really take sometimes some tough decisions, hold by it. And if you really believe, let's say, in the vision of the business, and you're being also realistic, let's say, to call it the investor or the counterparty that you're negotiating against. If you think you're still being realistic, then it might come around the way that you want it.
Funding is a really interesting topic. A lot of people are stuck because they think they don't have the funding. How did you figure out your funding?
So initially, we thought it was a good idea to join one of the accelerators, and accelerators was a new thing that was happening back in 2015 when we first started. So I applied to Flat Six Labs, and it was funny actually. The person who poached me to go into Uber was also at Flat Six Labs before she joined Uber. So she had a
Nice.
bit of startup experience, had a good relationship there. And after a year, and I told her I'm out, and she was also leaving to start something new. She said, reach out to Flat Six Labs. I know them very well, and I can give a good recommendation, given that I've worked with you for a year. So I applied to the program. I got accepted quite fast. They actually started the program, and they kind of fit me in, type of thing.
Cool.
Jad came on board, 2 weeks later, and we prepared, trying to cook the whole business model, right, and get something that we can present to investors. And in the accelerator program, you always work towards, after 2 months or 3 months, there's something called a demo day, where you're in a room and you present the idea to investors.
Right.
So we did that. We presented the idea to investors, and I also went out to my network of friends and family, people I used to work with, and all of that. And I pitched the idea, and I explained to them. Some of them have never invested in a startup. They also had that challenge: how do you give up 20% and you're
Exactly.
not putting any money into it and all that.
Exactly. It's a very traditional, a counterintuitive thing, right?
Yeah.
You need to explain the whole.
So you need to educate as
Yeah,
well
educate.
and explain and
Yeah.
show them the upside and all of
Exactly.
that. So within, I would say from demo day, we were the fastest company out of all the accelerators that Flat Six Labs ran in the MENA region to be able to close the required funds, which was around $400,000.
Wow. So you
as a
raised
seed.
as a seed $400,000.
Yeah.
How many days after
Pre-revenue,
demo day?
pre-product, pre-everything.
Just on the idea and the founders.
Exactly, and I think there was a strong founder fit. You know, in terms of like preparing the numbers and understanding the business, financial modeling, all of that. I think that we presented something quite strong, as well as the experience at Uber had a strong name, saying basically Rami is going to create the Uber for laundry.